Hi everyone, this is Ellie Mae with Silhouette Secrets Plus, and today I have a new portrait for. I got this portrait for through Crafter Cuts. Check the links in the description below. I am going to have more information for you, not only on links on where you can get this portrait for now, but also tips for the steps I'm going to be showing you in my first cuts with this portrait for print and cut on stickers. So make sure to check out that link in the description below. We're going to do something a little bit different today. You don't need to watch me in slow-mo open up this box and take out all the packaging. So I'm going to speed this up. We're going to take everything out, and then I'm going to explain what is in the box with the portrait for and what the new features are. So let's get started. Make sure when you open the box to get everything out of the box and don't leave anything in it. I would recommend not throwing anything away until you make sure you have all of the pieces for your machine. And also check out the QR codes and the setup instructions on the side of the box, as well as look at the box for inspiration and tips and tricks as well. So when you are unwrapping this, be very careful with the housing when you take that tape off. Do not rip the tape off like a Band-Aid. Just be very careful when you're doing that. Okay, as you can see, there's really not a whole lot in the box, so it doesn't take that long to unbox everything. Now, I want to bring the camera in here closer, and I want to show you exactly what is in the box because there are a couple new things here. Okay, so here is the portrait for main body. Let's take a look at the accessories that come with it. So you have your power cord, which comes in two separate pieces. You're going to connect that power box in the middle, and you want to make sure that connection is secure. This is the one thing we find with users who lose power, that connection has not been secured. Then you're going to have a little tiny bag, which I would suggest keeping your little tiny bag, and that contains your tool adjuster. This is how you would clean your blade. You can use it on the bottom of your blade to unscrew the cap to clean it. You have the Type B auto blade for the portrait for, and then you have this new little power adapter that is for the portrait for. The first thing I want to mention is do not lose this. Put it in a safe place, put it back in the bag for right now. This is going to be used on the portrait for, but I also want to tell you that it is magnetized. So I noticed when I set it down on my table, it would not sit in a certain direction. It would move by itself because it has a magnet. There you go. Has a magnet in it. So you want to be very careful of that. And then we're going to take a look at here on the top of the portrait for. This is, it matches. So you have your magnet, and then you have your little plugs for your power plug. Now you're going to, when you use this with the heat pen, which is a new tool, you're going to place that on top of the power plug there, and then your heat pen goes on top of that. The reason that it cannot be a piece installed on the machine is then the lid would not close if it was, because of this new powerhouse tool design. So I want to make sure that you know not to throw this away. This is not going to be, I'm not even sure it's going to be a replaceable part. Put it back in the bag. Put it back in the bag with your tool and keep that somewhere safe. Very, very safe. Now, let's take a look at a couple of the features on this. So you now have a repeat job button, which was highly requested to have return for the machines. You have a Bluetooth button, and then you have buttons here to move the housing, your pause button, and your load and unload buttons. We have a new design on the rollers for the portrait for. You can now move the right roller on the portrait for. This was not an option in past models. So you can now move this right roller. I'm going to move these guides out of the way, and we can take a look here. There are still certain areas where your right roller can be locked in place. You're going to feel as you slide this along. So all I did was I lift the handle, and you can lift it here and then slide it, or you can lift it and lock it up to slide it and you will feel it slide into those sections where it can be locked in place. So there is certain areas where that roller is secure on the machine. So you're going to be able to feel that once you open up your portrait and start taking a look at it. So we'll take a look at where we should have it for cutting with a mat and cutting without a mat. You still have these spring guides. It is a completely new design for both the Portrait 4 and the Cameo 5. So you have these little springs here. They are not rollers. These little springs are guides that help to keep your material flat as it's being cut so it does not bubble up between the two rollers. You're going to want to make sure that you keep your rollers clean on this machine because it is going to be a lot more difficult to clean them if you get adhesive on them. So let's take a look at the blade housing. We have this blade housing. We're going to take a view from the top. You have your locking tab at the front. You're going to pull the locking tab out, and then you're going to take your auto blade, and you have these little hooks areas on the front of your auto blade. This is still the #1 issue that we see with cutting issues, is not having your blade installed properly. So you pull out the locking tab on the front, you're going to carefully slide that blade into place, and you're going to lift up gently on the front of that lock. Hold the blade down, and then you're going to push the locking tab in on the front of the blade. You should see those hooks on the front. Grab the auto blade so it is secure. You do not want to have any gap between the lip of the blade and the housing. This is still the #1 cut issue since 2016, but it is a problem for all models of machines if you do not have your blade secured and seated properly. So now let's take a look. We'll switch back over to a frontal view and I'll show you a few more things. Okay, so one thing I want to mention before we get this hooked up to my computer and get started with a print and cut project is the Portrait 4 now has the capabilities to cut 8.5 inches wide, which is the width of letter size sheet of paper. On previous models, it was only able to cut 8 inches wide. So this is a new feature, but with that new feature, we also have a new cutting mat. So I'm just going to take this blue protective sheet off so you can see. Now you are going to need to use the new cutting mats with your Portrait 4. This is very specific because this machine cuts the 8.5 inches wide material. If you use older mats that were designed for the older models, your materials may not line up and you may not have results with print and cut. Print and cut is very, very specific. I'll show you a couple tips here and things that you might not have thought about. This is a newly designed mat, so it does look different than the old style of cutting mats that had the different designation marks at the top. So I just want to make sure that you are aware, and very specific to this machine is the new Portrait 4 cutting mat. So I'm going to go ahead and put my protective sheet back on because I don't want it to get dirty. It's currently the only mat I have, so I want to make sure to keep that in good shape. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of this new style for the Portrait 4 to be used with this machine. And the new style probably will not be compatible with the older model machines. So you're going to want to pay very close attention to the cutting mats that you are purchasing for your portrait machines. Okay, I'm going to grab my computer and we're going to get hooked up and get started with a project. Okay, so now I've got my computer. We are ready to go to connect to the Portrait 4 for the very first time. The first thing I'm going to say is you do need to have updated software. You do need to be using a version of Silhouette Studio software, a version 4.5.735. Links are in the description below for more information on the software version. If you are on older software versions, it will not recognize the new machine models. So you will need to update the software. And then the next thing we're going to do is once we connect, we are going to be prompted to do a firmware update. If you are using 4.5.735, depending on when you're watching this video, you may need to connect by the USB cord in order to complete that firmware update. There is no USB cord included in the box. You will need to use a USB cord that is in your stash. Usually it's just a regular USB printer cord. The reason is that technology is changing and computers are not all connecting with USB cords. There are multiple adapters being used for multiple different brands of computers now. With the Bluetooth option, it is not typically necessary, but I do know that hardwire is always the most secure connection, as other devices can interfere with your Bluetooth. So grab one of those USB cords, have it handy if you think you'll need that or if you're going to use that. It's the same USB cable as what is used with other models machines, older model machines. So we're going to try and see if this will update the firmware by the Bluetooth connection. So I have plugged in my power cord. I have plugged in the power bank in the middle. You saw me do that. I'm going to plug into the left. It's actually the right side, my left, right side of the machine. We have our connections over here. So I have the power connection, and then I have the USB cable port, and then I have my power button. Now, this machine is also enabled with the quick shut off or the quick stop on the new machine models for the Curio 2, Cameo 5, and the Portrait 4. That means that with the power quick shut off or quick stop, now you're going to hold the power button down for about 3 seconds, and then it's going to power on your Portrait 4. Because of that new quick shut off, you need to hold that power button down for the 3 seconds when you turn it on and also when you turn it off. Now, I have my software already opened up, and right now the Bluetooth light is blinking, and that means that it's checking for the connection and it's searching for my computer. So I am already updated on the software since I've been playing with the Curio 2. In the description below is information on the software version. So let's jump over to the Silhouette Studio and I'll show you my files. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 different ways that you can cut with the Portrait 4. We're going to cut with the cutting mat, and we're also going to cut a sticker sheet without the cutting mat. Now there is very, very specific setup information here, so I want to point that out to you as we go along. So the first one we're going to do is I've set up this sticker file. This is a file from Wispy Willow Designs, and I added a cut line. I will zoom in here and show you. So I did an offset of the cut line and I turned it blue so I can do a kiss cut on the red and a die cut on the blue. Anytime you are cutting completely through a material, we want to use a cutting mat. You do not want to cut through a material completely when you are not using a mat, or you could damage your machine. So I have already printed these. I have these files right here so we can get this quickly going. And I am going to grab the file that was for the cutting mat, and I'm going to place it on my cutting mat. Now remember, I mentioned that the new Portrait 4 has a new designed cutting mat. Let's go ahead and take the blue cover off. Don't throw that away. That is for your protection to keep the lifespan of your cutting mat. You now have a new grid on it, and it is very easy. The older ones could be confusing to users. You're simply going to place your letter size sheet of paper, or your 8.5 wide sheet of paper, exactly as it shows on the screen. So you're going to place it to cover the cutting grid on your cutting mat. So we're going to set that up just like this, and you want to make sure that it's completely flat and that it is in the exact position. With print and cut on Silhouette machines, it is excellent, but it has to be set up properly and it has to be loaded correctly, and the machine is looking for those registration marks in very specific locations, and you're going to see an example of that here in just a minute. So once I have my sticker sheet on my cutting mat, I am then going to come back over to the software because we need to get the machine recognized and make sure that if there's a firmware update or not. So I'm going to come back over to my software. I'm going to zoom out here for the full sticker file, and then I'm going to come up to the top right corner and click on the Send tab. Now, the last machine I used was my Curio 2, so I'm going to simply come down here to this little machine icon. This is my machines list. It has a little red number, and I'm going to click on it. So currently it's showing portrait 4 and it's saying unknown. That's okay. I'll link in the description below why that is, and I'm going to click on it anyhow. Now it's showing as connecting, and then it's going to check for a firmware update, and it's going to ask me to press update now. So I'm going to press update now, and then it should take just a few seconds, sometimes a minute. It depends on your internet connection. So it does need an internet connection. Do not switch off your portrait 4, and we're going to see. Typically what happens is that it's going to download that firmware update through the internet connection, and then the machine will turn off and it will come back on. Okay, now it's going through its steps. It turned itself off. It's coming back on. That means it's completed. So now we should be good to go. It's going to give it a second to connect and bring that up in the Silhouette Studio software. So we're just going to continue to watch that, searching, trying to reconnect, and the Bluetooth light is flashing. And now it shows load media. So it does take a few seconds, and the software automatically checks for a firmware update with any of the newer models since the Cameo 4 was released. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a little trick in the Silhouette Studio software. So I have a kiss cut line and a die cut line designated by line color. First, I want to come up here and I want to choose my material. If I choose my material and select it here, it's going to change it for all of the line colors on the next page. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to use my own setting for sticker paper. So I'm going to use sticker paper white, and doesn't seem to have saved it. So I'm going to decrease that to a 1. I know my kiss cut setting for this brand of sticker paper 2 cuts through. So I'm going to come, now that I've changed the material, if I come up here to the line style, it changes that material for every single color on my line, and I don't have to do it individually. If you come to this tab first, you'll have to change each of those material types individually. So what I'm going to show here, this little gray cross-hatched is actually the graphics of my sticker. And then I have a blue cut line, which is going to be my kiss cut. I actually want my blue line to complete after my red line. So I simply grabbed blue and I dragged it underneath the red. So I want my sticker kiss cut. I'm going to click on the red color, and I want to make sure that red is selected here. If it's not showing in the bottom, you could be changing the cut settings for the wrong color. So I want to, it did not take here, so I'm going to decrease that to a 1 for my kiss cut. And then I am going to select my sticker paper, and in this case I'm actually just going to change it to a different material, cardstock plain, and then that's going to give me a cut through setting. So I'm simply going to use that for my die cut. And then I'm going to jump back to the machine so we can get it loaded. Now I have my cutting mat here with my sticker paper loaded on it with the new Portrait 4 cutting mat. The great part about the Portrait 4 is they listened. The load lines on the older model machines were confusing. So now here's a close-up of the Portrait 4. We have a new load line, and it has a designation with an arrow pointing at it like the other Silhouette model machines. This is great. It's not confusing anymore. You know exactly where to load your cutting mat. Now I'm going to place the left edge of my cutting mat next to that line that the arrow points to, not over top of it, or you can block the adjustment hole. And then you want to make sure that your right roller is on the edge of your cutting mat. In previous portrait model machines, it rolled on the material or on the adhesive of the cutting mat. It's one of the reasons the Portrait was not one of my favorite machines. Now I think it might be. It's very portable, it's very light, and the rollers don't roll on the adhesive. It also has that 8.5 width on this new Portrait 4 for the cutting. With your mat held up to the rollers, you're going to push the load button, and it's going to pull it into the machine the exact distance for the cutting mat. Because we have told it in the software that we're using a cutting mat, it knows the exact distance at the top margin for a portrait cutting mat. Other third-party cutting mats may not be the same dimensions, and that could affect your cut placement and your print and cut accuracy. We see it all the time. So I'm going to jump back to the software so we can send this to cut. Now it's still showing me no media loaded. That is a bug. I'm going to click send and see what happens. It's going to ask me if I have loaded my sticker paper. Yes. Have I loaded my auto blade? Yes. I'm going to click send. And then it's going to register the print and cut. The optical eye is looking for those black registration marks, very, very specific locations. I'll try and do a video at the very end of this that shows you that optical eye movement so you can see how it really functions. It's setting your auto blade, and now it's going to perform the kiss cut first on all the stickers, and then it'll come back and do the die cut on all of the stickers. We're going to speed this up to the end of the cutting process because you don't need to watch the machine cut. Okay, now we have our sticker sheet. I'm going to press the unload button. It's going to eject that mat. And then I'm simply going to take my mat, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to peel the cutting mat away from the materials. And then I'm just gently holding that down on the table surface. This can help your materials release from the cutting mat. It can save your cutting mats and make them last longer. And it can help your material, especially paper, from not curling as much. Even for a brand new sticky mat, that really worked well. So you can see I have my die cut sheet of stickers. So I'm going to just carefully remove these. I'll speed up this video as I do this. All right, it took me longer to remove the stickers from the sticker sheet than it did for me to set up the print and cut. So I'm just going to cover that mat back up. The next one I'm going to show you is cutting without a mat on stickers. So I do want to show you this. It did die cut and it did do that kiss cut. So now I have the kiss cut that cut around the sticker. So perfect print and cut. I will do a close-up photo here so we can see on the edges and how accurate it is in the placement. Okay, now I want to show you another neat trick that you can do with any of your Silhouette machines, but there are a couple things you need to set up properly first. So I'm just going to simply slide these all over here. I'm not using my cutting mat. And I am going to set this up to cut a sticker sheet without a cutting mat. Now, again, you do not want to cut completely through a material unless you're using the pop-out setting. So I'm only going to be kiss cutting through this, which will save me the hassle of peeling it off, all the die cut stickers off my cutting mat. Now there's a couple things I want to point out here. So I'm going to show you a close-up photo here. When you print with a cutting mat, the registration marks are in a very specific location. When you switch and you print without a cutting mat, and you're going to be cutting without the cutting mat, the registration marks do change on the page. You do lose some of that cuttable space because the machine has to hold that material securely in the machine as it's cut. So you're going to notice here in this photo that the one on the right-hand side is the one that was printed with no mat selected, and the bottom registration mark is higher on the page than the one printed on the left, which was printed for a cutting mat. So let's take a look at how this looks in the Silhouette Studio software. So back in the software, I'm going to click back on the Design tab, and I already have my file open here. So on this particular file, you can see here I have a cutting mat designated for my Portrait 4 in the top right page setup panel. You can see that it is very, very specific. It shows the cutting mat on the page and my registration marks. Now, when I switch to the next file, sticker with no mat, you're going to see there is no cutting mat on the page, and my registration marks, specifically this bottom registration mark, has shifted and changed. This is why you can't simply do all your prints and then change to no mat, because those registration marks are not in the same place. So let's take a look at that again. On my cutting mat, here is my bottom registration mark. If I pull a guide out from my ruler at the top, my bottom registration mark reads at the y-axis of 10.375. If I come over to the no cutting mat and I pull a guide out and I bring it down here to this bottom registration mark, it reads at the 10-inch mark. So you can see right there on the screen the differences, not only in the print when you physically print it out, but on your screen you can see that there is a change. So I'm going to use this setup, again, on the page setup panel, Portrait 4, cutting mat is none, and then I'm going to come up here to the Send tab. Now, it still recognizes my vellum. That's the last thing I cut on the last machine when I saved this file. So I am simply going to change my setting to my white sticker paper setting, which is the one I've created, sticker paper white, and I'm going to change it to a 1 of blade depth. We don't need to pay any attention to this cross cut here at the bottom. We're simply going to be using a sheet of letter size paper. And then let's jump over to the machine and get this set up. So when we're working with no cutting mat, you want to make sure that your right roller is moved to the correct location. So what I simply do is I'm going to hold up my media to the load line, and then over here on the right hand side, this is where I need my roller to be. So I'm simply going to lift up that lock and I'm going to move that right roller to the designated section. You can feel it as you move it along there to place it on the edge of my material. So that looks correct. And then I'm going to lock that into place. And then I'm going to hold my media up to the rollers with the left edge next to the load line on the left, and I'm going to push the load button. Now, when I've loaded the material into the cutting machine, because I have no mat selected in the Silhouette Studio software, it knows that exact distance to load the machine for the letter size sheet of paper. And then we're going to send this to cut. So let's go back to the software. It still gives me this no media loaded, but my send button is highlighted. It is the bug in the software. It's been reported. It'll be fixed sometime down the road. As long as it lets me send, I'm going to click send. So I'm going to choose send, and it's going to ask me if it's loaded. Am I audibly loaded? Yes, send. And then it's going to register those marks. Again, because I have no cutting mat selected, it's looking for those registration marks in a very specific location. Now you probably missed it, but when the entire sheet rolled into the machine, that is where the machine needs the space to hold the sheet of paper in the machine securely while it cuts. If that registration mark was farther down, it wouldn't have enough material to hold in the machine as it's being cut at the very bottom. So that is why that registration mark is different than when you cut with a cutting mat. So let's take a look at this. I'll speed up this video as this cuts out. Now here is where we're going to see if that registration mark was farther down, the rollers would lose grip on the materials. And this is also why when you cut vinyl without a mat, you need to leave a 1-inch clearance on the very edge of it. It has to hold that material securely while it's being cut. So you can see it's disappearing under that roller bar. Okay, now it's been cut. We're going to go ahead and press the unload button, and it's going to eject that. So I'm simply going to come over here with my weeding tool. I'm going to grab a corner, and I'm going to carefully peel this away. And I have my Kiss Cut stickers. Just make sure you don't stick your sticker sheet back down to your cut stickers. And it did a perfect cut. Let's get this all off. And there we have just a little piece of our sticker paper in there. And there we have our sticker sheet that we cut without a cutting mat because we're not cutting all the way through that material. It works great for that stickers. I love the new load line and the new rollers. You're not going to be as excited about it if you did not have a previous model of the portrait, but I think this is a great update. I'm going to have more videos coming out using the Portrait 4, the Cameo 5, and the Curio 2. Check out the rest of the videos on the YouTube channel. I also have silhouette classes. There are links in the description below on this video for more information and everything that I covered today, as well as those silhouette classes that I have. Step-by-step classes for how to set up projects and how to use your machines. Thanks for joining me. I hope you have a great day. Have fun playing with your Portrait 4. Now here's a close-up look, like I mentioned earlier in the video, of the optical eye turning on and the registration marks being red. Look very closely at your machine. It's really hard to get it all on video, but you can see that optical eye turn on when those registration marks. And here's a close-up look of the finished stickers for this video. I hope these tips have helped. Have fun and enjoy your portrait. Thanks for joining me. Check the description below for more information.